You there, John? That is no. Right. So, like I was saying, sports psychology is using the power of the mind to give power to the body. Does that quite make sense to you girls?
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty much what I like to say is that you can develop your physical side of your game. So sometimes on the big occasions, mentally, you don't know how to apply, or something blocks you from executing what you want to do. If you can moderate and regulate how you think, it allows your mind and your body to be in sync. A great example of this was, did anyone watch Simone Biles at the gymnastics in the Olympics?
Yeah.
Do you remember what she said and why she pulled out some of the competitions during the Olympics? Yeah, a little bit. So what she said was that, yeah. So
she wasn't mentally stable, like.
so I wouldn't say she said she was not mentally stable. What she said was that her mind and her body were disconnected and they weren't on the same page. So she said that when she's doing, like you said, the twisties or the big flips or the 360s, that it's quite dangerous, that if the mind's not there, she'll make mistakes. And if you watched some of her early, I guess, qualifying stages, you saw she didn't look as composed as she normally would. And she looked a little bit more wobbly. As a result, she decided to take a break from the sport, which is, again, when you're in that big occasion, it's particularly stressful and challenging to do, but she did that. And she came back and she won a bronze within, I think, a final event. Again, allowing herself mentally to sort of recompose herself. But it shows you like how powerful the brain and the mind can be. And if you're not in the right frame of mind or not in the right space, it can make a big difference in terms of how you perform and whether you're successful or not. Obviously, if I've not sold you on psychology with my own quote, I've put 3 more quotes here from 3 athletes. Some of you might be familiar with. So you got Muhammad Ali on the left-hand side, which says, "It's a lack of faith that makes people afraid of meeting challenges, and I believe in myself." On the right-hand side, you've got Michael Jordan, who says, "Some people want it to happen, some people wish it would happen, some people make it happen." So again, the application, the attitude towards your sport. And then the middle one, which is probably an athlete you might not be familiar with, he's a bit old now. His was, "Just because they say it's impossible doesn't mean you cannot do it." And I for the last few years, I've always done this as a little quiz. Does anybody know who the athlete is in the middle? There is a little clue on the time on the top left-hand corner of the picture. Sorry?
We can't wait to see it.
Go closer.
It says just because they say it's impossible doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah, and there's a little, if you look closer, you'll see there's a little time, so it's 3:59.4. So that's a clue to kind of what.
Oh my God, I'm right.
Don't worry, I can't see you, don't worry.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. So this
Runner.
guy, he's a runner, yeah, that's a good shout.
It's a runner. 3:59.4.
That's the clue. That's the clue.
Is it a runner?
It's a runner, yeah, yeah, and
Yes, a runner.
that's the time he got for the distance he did. But he was.
Do you know he was a runner, wasn't he? Yeah. Definitely not. Sorry.
He was famous for getting a certain time for a certain distance. It's now been broken since, but at the time it was perceived impossible.
You trying to guess his name?
Yeah.
Could it be Chris Jenner?
Can I give you no? Shall I give him a clue, Casper?
Yeah, give him a clue. Yeah.
What do you use to get up the stairs to help you? What lift?
Staircase.
Rails.
To get up the stairs. Bannister. Bannister. Chris Bannister.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know.
You got the second name right. It's the first name. Starts on it. You got it? No, nearly.
First 2 letters. First 2 letters are right.
Rob.
First 2 letters are right.
Ross.
No.
Robbie. Romeo.
Romeo. Okay, that's a different one. No, so it was a guy called Roger Bannister.
Roger.
Yeah, so you're nearly there. You got the first 2 letters. So I think it was it might have been I think it was 50s or 60s. At the time, they perceived that you could not run a mile in under 4 minutes, which nowadays athletes do time and time again. But at the time, no one thought he could do it. And he was the first one. And quite prestigiously, he was a British athlete and he was the first one to run a mile in under a minute. And you can see on his face how exhausted he is from that. But yeah, he just proved I would say the powerfulness of psychology and your mindset towards something. It can push you and give you that extra 1% that you need to keep going. So even though he's not as famous and he didn't have a glorified career in terms of winning medals and winning championships, he stood for much more in terms of, if someone says it's impossible, you cannot do it, he's a prime example of that you can do it and prove people wrong. So if that's the one way to kind of find value in psychology can use just to prove other people wrong that you can do something. So this is kind of the background of how it works. So I will come back to this time and time again in regards to, this is how you start off with thoughts and feelings. So you can see there's kind of like a triangle approach to kind of how psychology works. It's super simplistic. So it's pretty much starts off with the way you think affects how you feel, which then affects your behavior. And it can go vice versa. So the way you behave can affect how you feel, which then affects how you think. But in my sense, it's quite easy to start off with. If you think positively, you feel good, then you play good. It's a simple way of doing things. And that's why it's so important, because your behavior, your decisions, the way you apply yourself starts off with your attitudes and your mindset. Often though, people forget that and they don't always realize the influence and the impact it can have. But like all areas of performance, psychology is just as important. And you can see on the slide, can you see roughly on the slide? There's 4 areas.
Yeah, we can't see the words inside it.
You know, so okay, I'll show that. So in the diagram you can see, you've got technical, physical, tactical, and psychological. I would say that of these 4 areas, psychological tends to be the one that you're exposed to the latest on in your athlete development. If you go into sport very on, you already learn about the physical side. So how do you need to be, what strength you need to have, your cardio, your fitness levels. Technical, very simple, the skill execution. And then tactical is the strategy side. So those things are talked about every single training session constantly from an early age. Whereas psychologically, it's not talked about as much. So my first question to you, and it's really, really simple. If you had 100% and you could allocate a percentage to each area of performance, what would you give for each one?
25% each.
Yeah, you could go down the easy 25% each. If you give it a bit more thought, is there anyone's in your opinion which are more important? And then can I just say there's no right or wrong answers because it all depends on your perception. So anyone want to try and challenge the 25% ratio and go for a different one?
I feel like physical is quite important because that's like how you actually play handball.
Yeah. So the ability to score a goal or throw a certain distance all depends on how much physical strength you have. Okay. So with that in mind, what would you?
We're going to go round the wall and say that's really important.
So say that one again. I think I missed what you said.
Psychological.
Okay. So what we start with, what percentage would you allocate psychological?
Sorry, what did you say?
What percentage would you allocate psychological out of 100%?
30, 35.
Okay, 35. Okay, physical.
The same, probably around the same. Yeah.
So you got 70. So then you got 30% to play with here. So how would you allocate it? What would technical get?
Like tactical. 15. Technical is quite important. I mean, you've got tactical. I just think psychological is very important because your mind's not in exactly game, and how can you be technical? Because your mind was very good. Yeah, I think it all links from psychological.
I mean, I think tactical is a bit more important than technical because tactical, it's your mindset on court.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, what's the difference between tactical and psychological?
Oh, okay, so tactical is more like the strategies that you would use within a competition. So like a gameplay, for example. Whereas psychological is more about how you apply yourself, how you deal with your emotions, how you deal with your thoughts.
Yeah, that's definitely more important.
What's
getting yourself to?
Well, I say tactical might be a little bit more of a percentage.
What was the technical? What do you
We've got 70 of us, we have 30 left, so
I think
no, 15.
15.
I think they both need
Yeah.
11. So.
15 each, the last two.
Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting though because they all interlink in some ways. You all had those slightly different opinions. Like in my opinion, the ability to like say technical, which is like your skill acquisitions, or how you execute a skill, so like an effective shot or a pass. The ability to execute that skill all depends on where you are psychologically. So if you're all emotional or anxious, your ability to execute a skill could be impacted. Psychology impacts the ability to process information, scan your environment. So from a tactical point of view, if you're emotional, you're not quite in the right frame of mind, you might employ the wrong type of strategy or the wrong type of tactical skill. So they all interlink. But I agree with you that probably physical and psychological tend to be the most important ones. Again, it can always constantly change. But from my opinion, psychology can have a big impact. So this is a fun example, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this. This is a video of Novak Djokovic. So if anyone a big fan of tennis in the room?
Anyone a big fan of tennis? I mean, I watched tennis yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched it, but I don't.
Wait,
I'm not
wasn't that?
We watched the match yesterday.
No, is that a?
Yeah, so you watched Emma Raducanu when the
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a great, again, she was a prime example actually of an athlete. If anyone watched their interview, she reinforced about the mental side of her performance. Actually, she talked about staying present, shot by shot, just enjoying the experience and not getting sort of caught up in the moment too much. But this, I can't remember when it was taken, but this is an example of Novak Djokovic losing it a little bit. So just give it a watch. It has got subtitles, so if you can't hear it, just kind of read what's going on and kind of think about, right, psychologically, how is his mind impacting his performance levels?
What's it say? It's 5-4. Tapping him twice on the foot. Made yourself a mark in this match. Great job, man. Especially in the second one. Great job. You made yourself famous. Well done.
That's literally mean to a referee.
According to the Grand Slam rule book, touching a woman's flag could carry a penalty. They shall not full time.
There's 20,000.
Yeah.
What's he done?
Touch the twice.
What? Hit it.
He has tapped it.
I swear any contact is
He
fine.
doesn't believe you had stepped.
You win. You kind of look like
I did know that it was completely forbidden. I thought it was a nice, really friendly touch.
It does look like it.
I think what you said
in terms of
afterwards
his
is conscious.
conscious.
Like, you did a great job, man. I've been being really sarcastic.
Right, so yeah, I mean, I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize that was in the video. So you can probably see that he had quite an emotional journey within that performance. Yes, he won the match, but I would say it could have easily gone the other way. So what would you say? What did you observe? And I know it was quite difficult to kind of see what was happening on the screen that you're watching from, but what did you see happen to him mentally during that competition?
He's just lost his temper.
Yeah, lost his temper. Anything else?
Yeah. I just lost it with mindset.
It also could have affected, it could have affected his mindset, because if they had taken action, like when he touched them, he might have been disqualified.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly. You might have seen as well. I don't know if you saw it, but you saw he made a lot of unforced errors during the competition. And I guess a handball experience of that could be a pass that was incomplete, a shot that didn't go into the goal. Within tennis, I guess within the performance, sometimes if the athlete takes advantage of a mistake you make, you could lose the competition. And what happened to him was you could say he got sidetracked a little bit. First of all, they mentioned about the crowd was against him. Secondly, as well, he wasn't happy with how the umpire was managing the match, and you saw he touched his foot. And if you know from any sport, if you touch the ref, whether it's a light tap, physical, or even heavy, you know that's a big no-no. Athletes in football, for example, have been banned from many, many games. And obviously, I don't know what actually happened to Novak Djokovic after. I don't know whether he was fined or whether something was happened. I don't think it did. He might have had a fine, but you saw, if you read it, I think it carried a $20,000 fine, which is quite hefty. But it just shows that emotionally, emotions play a huge part within sport. And psychologically, it also comes down to what your mind is on during a match. And you hear the term control the controllables, and he was getting caught up in what the umpire was saying. He was getting caught up in how the crowd was responding to him as well, which isn't a nice experience. And you might have seen yesterday when Emma Raducanu was playing in the US Open final that the crowd was much more heavily in favour of the Canadian. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, and you got to think, if you're 18 years old on this big stage in the limelight, you're in front of all these cameras, it could be very easy for you to crack under the pressure. And Emma Raducanu was someone who kept her composure. I don't think she really showed much emotion during, and even when she scraped her knee at the end, she just looked at it going, "Oh, I need to get that patched up." She didn't look like she was in much pain at all. She was so calm and collected within the moment. Very different to the kind of body language and the mentality that Novak Djokovic was showing. Obviously, he won the match, and you could probably say that he might have won the match because of his background and his training and his expertise and his commitment to the game, which kind of sort of pulled him through. But some athletes aren't as big of experts as him. So sometimes if you lose it emotionally and kind of can't focus, it obviously goes very quickly downhill. So the thing I want you to think about now, and I would have done this on a thing called Menti, but what we think more broadly, what do you think can affect you mentally during a game? So what are the different things that could influence your mindset during a handball match?
The crowd.
Yeah, a crowd, yeah. Anything else?
No, we're talking about what
Getting
pressures.
frustrated.
What pressures?
Whether you're losing or winning.
It was a question to like what pressures you during a match.
Yeah, just what kind of affects you mentally? So what things lead to you? Sorry?
Yeah.
Referee's decision.
That's always you saw like Novak Djokovic, that's a big example, yeah. So like an external thing like the ref. Did someone say performance as well?
I was going to say the score, because sometimes when people look at the score, they just kind of lose their focus.
Ah, okay.
And it's very pressuring either way.
Because then it kind of gets to the point where you just want to win, so you just start shooting out.
Yeah, and you're missing and everything.
There's no like all technical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
I think it's a great example because I know handball, the score can change very quickly, can't it? It's a high scoring game, and within a couple of minutes, scores can completely change around. And I've seen some athletes that, like you mentioned, you can look at the scoreboard and see there's a massive gap. So then your psychological goal changes into I want to shorten the gap. I want to get back to where we were or be on the same page, which then takes your mind off a little bit in terms of executing the shot correctly, or missing a pass, or forgetting what your responsibility is on the pitch. So that's a really, really good example, actually. Anything else? So you got scoreboard, refs, the crowd.
If you're playing badly, you might give up hope and keep playing badly.
Yeah, it's a great example. I mean,
once you get into that negative mindset, it's so hard to pick yourself back up.
Yeah, it's like a downhill spiral, isn't it?
Yeah, like if you just, I don't know, say you miss a shot, sometimes you just suddenly go into like a spiral of thinking you're not actually good player. That can really affect how you perform because like your confidence is just dropped.
Yeah, massively. It's really, that one little mistake can be severely damaging. Would you say it's the same influence in terms of positives? So if you get one positive, you can very quickly go upwards. Would you say it's the same progression?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Would you say you can maintain it as long as the negative side?
Pardon?
Would you say you can maintain a positive mindset as long as you would say a negative mindset?
Yeah, I think so. Well, depends. Yeah, I feel like if you start, on a good mindset, I feel like it's all about. I feel like it depends on how you start the game, and that's kind of It's really hard to get out of them.
Yeah, so need the person that can control your emotions is you.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you want to like persevere and try to either close down a gap, like talking about the score,
Yeah.
or you just kind of want to push your team to the last minute.
Yeah.
With like just a lot of players like start to give up
Yeah.
if you see the score like towards probably the last 5 minutes.
yeah. That's a great example. You might have heard, if you've watched any big sporting shows, they always say the biggest enemy or the biggest opponent is yourself or your own team. And that can be your biggest thing that defeats you. If you can manage that and manage your emotions, keep on top of it, then that can put you in good stead. I think as well, from a team point of view as well, I think you made a really, really good point in that if you let yourself down or you let yourself emotionally go, that can also impact how the team reacts. So no one mentioned actually that if your teammate is emotionally struggling or is displaying really bad body language, that can naturally influence how you look and how you hold yourself. Would you say you've experienced that before? Yeah. So it's like I call it effective energy. So like from a most point, if you see a teammate struggling, you've got to set the example, set a trend really. So you've got to display positive body language, and that's where like the leaders come in, because positive can kind of be infectious, but also the negative side can be very quickly infectious as well. And I'm sure you've all experienced it where there could be one match where you start arguing with your teammates and you're not on the same page, you start having to go at each other. And there's some, if you go onto YouTube, there's some crazy examples of videos of where teammates have completely lost it and started attacking each other. Very commonly in football, it tends to be. But again, it shows you from a team point of view as well, not just the opponent, your internal side and your own teammates can also have an influence on how you think and how you feel. So moving on, this is kind of coming back to it. This is like just the power of mind. We've chatted around a lot around what can go wrong emotionally and mentally and what leads to that. But it's important as well to flip it on its head and think, right, I want to think more positively. How can I do that? And this is just a great, I would say, a self-reflective exercise. And I always recommend any athlete to do this on a regular basis because it sets you in good stead. So what you do is you recall your best or your most favorite performance. It could be a recent one. It can be whether it's in training, it could be a competitive performance. I know sometimes the recent experiences might be limited given COVID stuff. Either way, choose an experience. And then what you do, this is where you reflect on using the right type of questions. So what I want you to now go is just think about this. Have you had any recent competitive action in the last, say, few months? Have you had any recent competitive action in the last few months?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what I want you to do is just kind of briefly think back to those things, and then what I want you to do is try to identify a performance, whether it's the whole match or a period in the match or in training, that you felt personally that it was really, really good and probably one of your top recent performances. Okay. Once you've done that, I want you to think about, the first thing I want you to think about is during that moment, what was going through your mind? Okay, so has anyone thought of an example or can recall a recent good performance?
At training?
Yeah, training, yeah, that's great. That's fine. It doesn't have to be in the competitive setting at all. If you feel like you've been a bit rusty, use training. Okay, so if we use a training example, it could even be in the last 24 hours, even a set play that you've done or a training drill that you've done. What would you say you were thinking during those moments when it was going well?
I like handball. Wow, I'm awesome.
Sorry, say that again. I couldn't hear very well.
Wow, I'm awesome.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
What was it?
If you do, just keep doing what you do.
I like that. So keep doing what you're doing. So like, so you were focused on just trying to maintain and boost yourself up in that moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you do a good set play, you might be more like tempted to do it in a match or try it in a match if it's gone really well.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were more risk taking.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that one. With that in mind, this links to this. I asked them, what were you thinking? And this might be a trick question. Would you say you were thinking, were you thinking at all? Were you focused on anything? Or if you look back on it, would you say, actual fact, mentally, I wasn't really thinking at all? Anyone in the room?
You just kind of apply it like out of nowhere. Like you think back to how your training session went and then you just kind of apply it to your game plans.
Yeah.
I feel like this sounds quite bad, but I feel like I think a lot more when I've done something bad.
Yeah,
If I've done something
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
can be seen as negative, I think
Yeah.
a lot more.
Yeah, no, then that's actually completely, that's how the brain works, funny enough. So when you do a good performance, and I presume you might be familiar with the term being in the flow, is a really common one. And when an athlete is in the flow or in the zone, which is another term that you might be familiar with, they're not actually really thinking, they're just doing. And often when it's the good stuff, you only will really think about it in detail after it's happened, not during, because everything's going so nicely, you just want to execute and go with the flow. Whereas a bad performance, yeah, you will think a lot more in that moment. And the reason that is your brain is literally got a negativity bias. Your brain is programmed that way. Does anybody know why the brain has got that bias towards negativity?
Because you want to improve, maybe.
Sort of, yeah, on the right tracks.
Like you need something to fix, so your brain's kind of like trying to solve the problem, maybe.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. So why do you think the brain does that? Why does it feel it needs to fix things and improve things?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
The only way you like get better is by doing it wrong first.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. But it's the reason why it's more from a protection point of view. So if you've ever heard of the flight or fight response, or it's like a prevention thing. So the brain is always constantly evaluating the environment, the situation you go through, because it's trying to sense threats to your safety, whether it's a threat to your self-esteem, to your confidence, to your physical well-being. The brain's always doing that, and the only way it can improve and at dealing with those problems and those threats is by learning and focusing more on the negative experiences of where you make mistakes. The problem with that kind of bias is your brain is thinking a lot more about the bad stuff, and sometimes it can be very easy to think about it in too much detail when there isn't really a need to do that. But it's very much like an instinct thing, which is why when you come into reflecting about something which takes more time, your brain can't do that instinctively because it's not an instinct. It requires more time. Whereas the negativity bias is an emotional thing where it's very quick and instant. And the better athletes have to pause themselves, allow that emotional side to calm down, and then re-engage in more of the problem-solving, rational mindset. They're completely different parts of the brain. So the negativity bias is more towards the back, I think called the amygdala. And then your brain, where it's more rational and calm and collected and problem-solving, is at the front called your prefrontal cortex, which is where you analyze the situation, you know what to do, you know how to react in the right moments. But that's not as quick because it takes more time to work out what it's doing. The next one was, how confident did you feel in those good moments? How confident were you?
Over the top.
Say at the top.
So over the top.
Really good. So again, you could even be arrogant if you wanted to. And do you know what? There's nothing wrong with saying that when you're in the moment, you're doing well, everything's just going right for you. You're allowed to feel arrogant. You're allowed to feel the best athlete on the pitch because you're proving not just to yourself, but also to your teammates and the crowd around you that you're doing well. So again, it shows you that a good performance, something that goes well, the common things that are associated are feeling good, confidence. I would say 9 times out of 10, you're not actually rethinking, you're just simply doing. Whereas a bad performance is focused on negative emotions, loads of actually thinking in the moment, loads of over reflection and being distracted and focus on things that you cannot control. And that's why I've got the question at the bottom. Wouldn't you like to consistently perform in that good zone? Because that's what psychology can do for you and allow you to do. But in order to get to that point, you've got to put yourself in the situation where you're reflecting on a good performance and what led up to that point. So kind of moving on to this, you've obviously talked a lot around psychology being a really important factor, and you've actually given some great examples of how the mind can impact your behaviors, like your strategies, your tactical, your technical sides. So what I'm going to ask you now is, how much time do you think you spend per week training on your mental side of the game?
None.
All I heard was
None.
none at all.
I think I've done it.
I
I
do.
don't really notice it.
Yeah, I do.
So this is the thing, this awareness. If I asked you how often do you spend time training, for example, let's focus on your strength and conditioning, so that's gym work, you could go bang out, you could go very, very quickly, oh, I do it 3 times a week for an hour each session. You know it instantly, pretty straightforward. Whereas psychology, it's more not so black and white. So an example of how you train your mind could be using music before a training session to help you make yourself composed. It could be you doing breathing exercises to keep yourself calm. It could be talking to a coach of how to improve your execution of skills, so that information going into your brain. So if I kind of ask that question again, so I've just given examples like using music as a prime example, or even doing like a routine, like a preparation routine before a training session, does that number of minutes go up in terms of your training side for mental?
Yeah.
A little bit. So you can start to do a little bit more, but you can probably see this, you probably realize you do a lot less compared to the physical, technical and tactical sides of the game. What would you say is the reason that you don't train the psychology side of your brain as much as compared to the other areas of performance?
I feel like it's not talked about much.
Okay, so would you say maybe the environment has had that impact on you, so you're not as self-aware?
Yeah, I'm mostly thinking of the physical side of things. Well, I was told, obviously, to go to training, but we don't really do a lot of mental.
It's more like tactical.
Yeah.
Okay, so it comes down to a little bit around the guidance and the instructions you've been given from the people around you when you've been training.
Yeah, and sometimes I find that I think too much. Doesn't go as well when I don't think as much.
Yeah. I get that. So then you're afraid to look at it in too much detail again. Oh, did you hear that?
Well, would you say so?
I was saying you made a really good point that sometimes that you realize if you think about it in too much detail or reflect in too much detail, it actually can be counterproductive because it makes you overthink and make mistakes and it becomes distracted. And a lot of psychology comes down to, first of all, around how you reflect and when you reflect. And I would just say that the golden rule for me, and I say this to anyone, that when you reflect, try to leave the in-depth reflection till after an experience, not during, if you can do. During a performance, if you catch yourself reflecting too much detail, use distraction techniques like you can visualize a stop sign. You can use 3 deep breaths. You could use a physical routine, such as you tap your hand, you click your fingers, you do a few jumps in the air. Those little things, like a little distraction to break the chain, allows you to pause your overthinking. And then you go to yourself, right, what do I need to do right now? Oh, it could be, well, I need to focus on how to execute a skill. It's just a breaking of the chain. And then you go right afterwards, when I calm down and got more time, I'm then going to look in more detail. Like I showed you at the start of the presentation, reflection needs quality time. But also as well, it needs you to ask the right type of questions. In the moment where you might have made a mistake and you try to work out what you've done wrong, you've got negative emotion kind of influencing how you're going to see things. And when you're feeling red or down in the dumps, you're only going to see red and perceive bad things. You're not going to be able to literally see a positive in the situation. So that's why you got to allow the emotions to calm down or distract yourself until a point where it becomes appropriate to reflect. So that would probably be my lesson to you, is work out when to reflect. And during a competition or training, try to use distraction techniques if you can do. And only when you're sitting down for a good 5 minutes, that's when it's time to kind of think in a bit more detail. So this is the kind of the process that you guys are kind of going through. So over the kind of like next, I would say 2 years of this kind of program, you go through 3 stages of psychological skills training or mental skills training, however you want to put it. You start off with education, which is, what is mental skills training? Why is it important? And how can I do it? So you learn the process, kind of like what we're talking about and kind of going through the motions. Once you understand what it's about and why it's important, you then move into a thing called the acquisition phase, which is pretty much where you test things out. You go into a training session and go, right, I'm trying to learn how to say a positive statement, or I'm trying out to use a bit of visual imagery. And you try it in training. Is it working? Great, let's do more of it. If it's not working, how can we tweak it? So that's the learning phase. You kind of, I would say, carrying out experiments. So you've gone to me, Cass, I want to do this, I want to learn that. Let's try out in the environment. If it's not working, we need to tweak things and change things. The final stage is, once you've developed and become consistently good at doing that, like executing a technical skill within training, you then move on to the practice phase, which is a bit misconceiving. It's actually the practice phase where you go into a competition and you successfully apply the mental skill. But as you can see, when it comes to goal setting, normally athletes go straight to competition and go around and set a goal. That I want to score X amount of goals or get a percentage return in my passing, accuracy, whatever it may be. But you've got to start from the bottom, understand why you do it and what it's about, learn the process, improve it during training, and then apply it during a competition. And that's what we will do as the kind of next 12 months goes on. So this just kind of summarize what we've talked about, really. So a meta skills training program, which is what you girls will set yourself and kind of alongside with me and the other coaches. In simple terms, it's an individualized design program for an athlete that involves systematically, which means in a set order, training psychological skills to meet your performance demands, to not just enhance your performance, but also to enhance your psychological well-being. And that's really, really important because, as you know, there's a very close link that something can happen outside of sport, which can very often impact you during your performance. So even though I'm talking about a term using called mental skills, a term that I like to use is called life skills. So you might start to learn a mental skill that helps you during your performance. If we can apply that in another aspect to your life, that then turns into a life skill, which can be really, really handy and helpful for challenging situations that you may face. The next question is it effective? And is it important? As you've already chatted about in really, really good discussions, you know psychologically it's really, really important, especially about how to control what you think and how you feel. Is it effective? Yeah, it's been utilized in several sports. Time and time again, mental skills training proves to be effective. Obviously, though, it can only be effective if it meets your needs. So what I want you to think about as I'm talking about this is, as you're talking through, and I'm talking about mental skills, think about personally, what do I need right now? Is it that I'm not great at managing my emotions? Is it that I sometimes get caught up in the past by making mistakes? I'm not able to re-engage in the present moment. Is it that sometimes I lose my concentration too easily? Those are little different things. So then that allows me to tailor a program that can actually suit your needs. So the key question is, what are the key skills? So from kind of education, my own experiences, and generally just elite research out there, these are kind of the 8, I would say, qualities, but also skills that the top elite athletes utilize and leads to performance success. Okay, they're not the necessarily very common ones, which you think like self-talk or imagery. So the first one, and this has been proven time and time again, if you haven't got the motivation or you're not passionate about what you do, 9 times out of 10, you won't get to where you want to be to the full level. So my first recommendation would be to you, if you feel right now that you're questioning about how much you love handball or your motivation can dip a little bit, think about what handball gives you. Whether that is you do handball to get the trophies, the competition wins, that's fine. Whether it's you use to feel good, whether you do handball from a social point of view, identify the reasons of why you do something, because that naturally will boost your passion. Secondly, as well, learn more about the sport. So to become passionate, you need to understand it and know lots about it. So that means watching videos, asking people about what they've gone through their experiences, learn more about the sport and spark your interest. Naturally, that will improve your passion and motivation. Motivation is critical for everything within sport. So those little things about learning more about what it gives you and why handball is interesting can make a big difference. You've got to think here called achievement goal setting. So when I've worked with a lot of youth athletes, when I tend to ask them is, well, how often do you set goals? And they will go, well, it tends to be that I set goals with my coach, what the coach tells me. So the best athletes in the world will self-set goals, which are focused on task mastery, which means executing the skill as opposed to looking good in front of other people. So I recommend the thing you need to think about going into sports psychology and in your performances, am I setting myself enough goals consistently? And that means setting your own goals within performance, such as technical, tactical, all the areas of performance. If you set your own goals, you're more likely to stick with it. Whereas if you go for a goal that someone else has told you, you're less inclined to stay engaged with that process. So it's a really, really important thing to do. Self-awareness and quality self-reflection. And you've heard me talk a lot around reflecting about what you go through and why you go through it. That's really, really important because it helps develop your self-awareness. And self-awareness is crucial because if you don't know what's going well and what's not going well, how can you expect yourself to set a realistic and appropriate goal and move forward? Planning and organization, which I would say is one of the boring skills of sport, but one of the most crucial ones. Who in this room would say that their planning and organization is atrocious?
Yeah.
Who was that that said that?
Everyone.
Oh, everyone. that's a crucial one. So if you're thinking right now, right, planning organization is something that I'm not great with. Even asking that simple question gets you moving forward. I think, right, I probably need to set a timetable up, prioritize the most important stuff. It might be get some support from other people. That's just a great example of a reflection. I've just asked myself, am I good at it? No, let's do something to improve it. Self-talk, which is all about your dialogue that you tell yourself. And that's why I put in here, think aloud, also think silently, because some athletes can be very verbal in terms of how they speak to themselves, whereas other athletes do it much more internally, so you can't really see it. Each athlete has their own preference. What I want you to think about is, as an athlete, am I someone that verbalizes stuff? If not, that's fine. Am I someone that's very much more internal? Because that gives an idea about how you can moderate how you speak to yourself. Mental toughness. So again, you might have heard in the US Open last night that Emma Raducanu was a lot of time they were talking about mental toughness, about how mentally tough she was within the build up to the final, but also during that final as well. If I asked you to define what mental toughness is, what would you say mental toughness is?
What's mental toughness? Come on. Someone give me a definition or a quote.
Strong-minded.
Strong-minded?
Yeah, that's great. You're strong-minded, yeah.
So you were going to say something else?
Yeah, if you like have something bad happen to you, not letting your emotions like have a negative impact.
Okay.
So facing something that was negative,
Yeah.
and then not letting it overcome.
Yeah.
Okay. So could you say as well, despite like, so like when you experience a negative experience, it's about staying positive despite what you've gone through?
That was a yes, Casper.
Yeah, yes, okay. So you got, yeah, so staying positive, obviously a tough mindset. You got, you said managing emotions. Anything else?
Some I don't knows.
Some of those. The final one I would say that with the the key one you nailed that you hit the nail on the head, that mental toughness is first of all about a positive mindset and keeping on top of stuff. The key one is commitment to the process, mainly because like from your experiences that sport isn't easy, and there's a lot of setbacks, there's lots of failures, lots of embarrassments. Mental toughness is about staying committed and staying focused on what you want to achieve and kind of continuing and persisting despite what you go through. And that's a really, really important thing. Whereas mental toughness and resilience can often get crossover, and there's a very close link. The key difference with resilience versus mental toughness is mental toughness, you stay positive, whereas resilience, you can be resilient in a situation, but you might not necessarily be positive about it. You just kind of push through things, but you could be negative within that scenario and be really scared, but you still push through. Whereas mental toughness, the key difference is you have a positive mindset towards the situations that you're engaging in. Self-belief, crucial, as you guys have talked about, and associated with that is a thing called a challenge mindset. So when you come or you're exposed to a situation which is challenging and stressful, you perceive it as a challenge and something you could maybe benefit from or learn from. Whereas if you have a threat mindset, that means you go into something lacking self-belief or not believing in yourself, which means you see the experience that it's going to dent you or make things even worse, or you're going to look bad or be embarrassed. Whereas someone with you can say mentally tough mindset, or they've got the self-belief, they're going to see, yeah, I perceive this as stressful, but I think I can cope. I can get something out of this. And the final one is psychological flexibility. So this is kind of the final, I would say the final outcome of all the things that lead to it, that once you're able to manage your emotions, become mentally tough, set goals, learn who you are, you're able to identify what to think and when to think a certain thing in those environments. You know when to think positive, you know when to distract yourself, you know when to manage your emotions. So you know you're flexible in how you manage your mindset, and that comes through experience and learning. So this is kind of the acquisition phase now. So we're moved into, hopefully you've got a good idea now of kind of psychology is important and what's it involved and what kind of the essential skills. This is a great starting point. And you guys have already had a few discussions about what you might need to do and what you might need to focus on psychologically. This is a simple process how you could do it. You go, start off with, what do you want? So focus on just one skill that you may be. So if you come back to that list that I showed you, it could be organization, it could be emotional control. Then think about, right, where do I want to be in, say, 3 months' time? What do I want it to look like? It could be that in 3 months' time, if I make a mistake, I'm able to stay focused on being in the present moment and re-engage in the process of executing my skills and focus on what's relevant. Then once you've got the goal and the picture in your mind, think about the desired end state, which is your feeling. So think about, right, how good would it feel if I have an experience where I'm able to manage my emotions? It'd feel great. That emotion that you attach to that goal will keep you pushing forward and give you that motivation and drive to keep going. The fourth one is, what do I need to do? Which is the crucial one. So if it is managing emotions, but you don't know how to manage your emotions, the bit what you need to do is, right, speak to Casper, learn some more. It could be ask one of my teammates who's good at managing their emotions, speaking to a coach. The process is the key bit. What do you need to do? And the final bit is just simply do it. Very simple process, but each part of the chain is really, really important. What I say the things you need to focus on the most is the visualizing the feeling at the end of the journey. So how good will it feel once you get to that point? Because emotions can really drive those positive behaviors and pushing you forward. And then the fourth bit is, what do you need to do? Because people forget that. They get caught up in such as the outcome and the end goal. You forget that the processes will get you to that point. So you need to break away and not think too much about the outcome and think more about the in-betweens and the processes that you need to follow and what you need to apply. So this is just kind of continuing with this, moving towards the end. So when it comes to sport, I think athletes develop good performance habits. And when I say a habit, I mean something that you consistently do time and time again. And every habit that we have in our life, whether it's a time you get up in the morning, having your morning shower, having your morning coffee, whatever it may be, that's all come through repetition and experiences. But before I jump into kind of what leads to a good habit and talk around the process of developing good habits, I want to open discussions again and think about, what do you think are good habits of an elite athlete? What are the good habits?
Good sleep.
Sorry?
Good sleep.
I can't hear that again.
Good sleep.
Oh, good sleep. Yeah, sleep's a great one. Yeah.
Enough training. Well, enough training.
Enough. So when you say enough training, do you mean consistent
Like
training?
probably quality and quantity, but like.
Okay. So making sure. Would you say? I guess we go to. So you mean when you are training, you're making the most of it, and you make sure it's quality.
Put like as much effort in as you can.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Anything else?
Good.
I said balanced diet.
Bob, I can't hear that. Do you want to say that again?
Balanced diet.
Balanced diet. Okay. So that's an interesting question. Who would say that over the last 18 months, their nutrition has got worse? Mackey's every day. Love the honesty. Yeah, it was challenging, wasn't it? Because I would say it's not a very fun part of performance, but it's a very, very crucial part. Anyone in the room actually feel that they've actually got better at managing their nutrition?
Now I have.
In lockdown, but then it went down again.
Ever since my brother,
A few months ago, no, but now.
chicken salad.
Okay, it was good. It's good that some of you have got better. I think it's sometimes as well. Sometimes it's a necessity, isn't it? Because you feel like, well, if I don't manage my nutrition, I'm going to come back into sport being sluggish and slow, and I don't want that feeling. So you kind of force yourself to develop a good plan and good process of managing nutrition. So you've got nutrition, sleep, quality training hours. Anything else?
Making sure you do like no strength and conditioning in between your training sessions.
Okay, so is that both? I would say straight like enhancement of your muscles, but also recovery as well.
Yeah, or if you can't do something, then making sure that like if say your shot was weak, if you worked on the strength of your arm, then it like increase your ability to play handball.
So you put two there actually. So you put recovery in there and training, but also you put in setting goals as well. So identifying areas of weaknesses and improving on it. It's a great example.
Can I pose a question?
Yeah, go for it.
This sounds like there's quite a lot going on, doesn't it? Nutrition, sleep, training, consistency. So what other skills might you really need?
Organisation.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Casper?
No, I didn't know.
So the Toughness said organisation skills as a result of the amount of stuff you need to be considered.
Yeah, it's a really, really important one. That. anything else? There's one more that I would hope that I want you to say, and think a bit more external here, think a bit more broad. There's one thing that I think Bobby would reinforce me on, that there's a really important skill to have or habit. Who's around you in your environment right now? Sort of, yeah, but you've got teammates, you've got coaches, you've got
adaptability.
Yeah, yeah. But the simplest one is people use the people around you as a resource. That's a habit in itself. Like, you're in a team sport. As humans, we're sociable, and even your teammates, they have so much knowledge, experience, understanding, different perspectives. Bobby's been in the sport for yonks, so much. So again, a habit in itself is regularly utilizing the people around you to improve yourself and manage your well-being. And sometimes we forget that. And people think when it comes to the social side that it's solely emotional support, but people bring so much more to the plate than just that. They have informational support, they have tactical support, it could even be practical support, whatever it may be, logistical support. People are great as a resource, and it allows you as well to not have to think as much, because some people can do some of the thinking for you. So I would stress that when you think about organization and planning, people are crucial for that, because they can help you tolerate it and deal with it better. But again, some great examples there, and it shows you that there's several habits. You could have other habits like managing your emotions regularly, having time to switch off, loads of stuff there. But habits, I would say habits are a crucial part of sports psychology. And when you develop one habit on your own, it goes through a four-stage process. The first one is a cue. What I mean by that is something that's told your brain to do something to lead to a desired behavior. So, for example, who always has to have a morning shower to start off the day?
I can't do it in the morning. I like it after.
Do you like it after? You say after school?
Yeah, I don't do it in the morning.
Okay. Yeah. I'm someone that whether I'm going to the gym, going to work, whatever, I have to have a morning shower because it sets me up for the day psychologically and keeps me fresh and alert. The cue for that is my cue is when I wake up, I feel sluggish. So the feeling of sluggishness is the trigger to then go, right, I need to go have a shower, because if I don't, I'm going to feel sluggish. The same example of that would be like if you wake up feeling sluggish, that means, oh, I need to have my coffee in the morning or my breakfast. Another example could be you get a thing on your phone that tells you to do something. So like a social trigger. It could be someone else tells you it. But those little triggers, whether it's internal you telling it, a feeling, whether it's an environmental trigger, that's the thing that sets you up to do a behavior. The second part of a habit isn't simply straight into the behavior, it's then the craving. So you've woken up feeling sluggish, and what you crave is to feel good, to feel ready, to feel focused. So that's the motivation side of a habit. So for example, the craving is, if you sleep well, that means you can perform well and feel energized. So the craving is you want to feel energized. The third bit is the routine, which then connects the craving, the cue with the behavior. So by having the shower, by having the good sleep, by planning yourself and being effective, that then leads to the final one, which is the reward, or what I call the prize, which will then reinforce the behavior and make it more likely to occur again. So if you sleep well, you perform well. You keep doing it, reinforcing it, it becomes more and more of a habit. And like I said here, the more rewarding the prize, the more likely your brain is going to remember the routine and do it again. So if you're thinking about right now, I've got some habits like my nutrition, or like something within my performance habits, which isn't very good. Think really hard about all the benefits you could gain if you could develop those habits and reinforce it. So once you do the good habit, savor the good feeling afterwards, because that's going to reinforce and make the habit more likely. So I'm just going to give you an example. So if you're not quite there yet with kind of how can I develop a habit, these are a few examples of what you can go through. And cues are the key way of telling the brain to do something. And there's different versions of cues. So you've got like a verbal cue, which is telling yourself what to do. A visual cue, so seeing something in the environment and recognize that as a cue, or behavior. So if we start at the top here, you've got instructional. So an instructional type of mindset is how to execute a skill or how to apply yourself. So you've got the verbal cue here, work hard. The visual cue would be look up, see what's going on. A behavior cue is, for example, put your weight on the front of your toes if you're doing that for a shot, or you need to be able to bounce up high to catch the ball. Motivational type of habit. So again, this is about the emotional side. Go for it, just do it. is a verbal cue. A visual cue is you see yourself on a podium or visualizing yourself doing well. And this is the biggest one, the behavior one. And a lot of athletes might do this. I don't think about this right now. Do you do anything at the start of the game to compose yourself or feel ready? I've got here slapping your thighs, clenching your fists. Does anyone do something religiously before a match or starting the first minute before the whistle goes?
Like bad habits.
No, not bad habits. Just like something you do as a cue to help yourself feel mentally composed and mentally ready just before the game's about to start.
I shake my legs and my arms. Sorry,
Yeah.
stamina, shake. Oh, yeah.
Might be interesting. They're going to go on court at 12, Caspar.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting just to pay some attention to what you do when you're about to start playing, because some people might not even be aware that they do anything at all.
Yeah. So I think about that, because that's something that'll be a cue that you do to set yourself into a certain mindset. That's a trigger for a way of thinking.
Sorry, Caspar, there's lots of chatting amongst each other at the moment about what they might do.
Sorry.
Does drinking water count?
Yeah, that's
I always clean the bottom of my shoes.
yeah.
Okay, so it's such a bad habit.
Yeah. Do you know you will do that because it will allow you to feel prepared and in control. And if you feel in control, you're going to feel more composed and more confident. But if you don't realize you're doing it, it's a weird to know. But when you go into training, think about what you do. You might not say you do it in training because it's not as necessarily as important. But just think about it. For me, I always had to pull up pull up my left sock and then my right sock, and then kind of put my arm do like a shoulder exercise. That's something I always used to do. It could be you take 3 deep breaths. But if you realize that one thing you do helps you, you can start to employ more and more and more for different scenarios. And those behavior cues are really good because it activates a certain type of mindset that you want to perform well. So this is kind of a process just to kind of reinforce what I've gone through. So if you're not still quite with it, so like the cue could be you make a mistake. So this you talked a lot about making mistakes and not be able to refocus on the relevant stuff. So the make mistake in itself is a cue because, oh no, I'm feeling rubbish. The cue would then be your head drops or your mind's focused on the wrong thing. So you go, right, my craving is to move away from that. And my end goal is I want to focus again and feel good. So that is the craving. The cue is making the mistake and feeling rubbish. So that feeling is the cue. The routine then would be, for example, you could use verbal behavior such as it's okay, calm down, focus on what's important, take 3 deep breaths. It could be a physical movement, like you said, like click your fingers, do 2 jumps and go again. But that routine is a key one because it's changing the mindset. And then the reward is once you've done those 3 deep breaths or said something verbally, you calm down, you move away from the mistake and you're able to reset and focus on the relevant goals. But that's a simple process that you go through. Obviously in handball, you can't think too much, that's why it's got to be so short and quick. The cue, make a mistake, craving, all right, I want to refocus. Routine has got to be so small and quick. I wouldn't say to an athlete, visualize something during a match because you probably haven't got the time for it. That's why more like a routine, like physical movements or breathing are much more effective because trying to think about stuff and work out what's going wrong and what to do right, you haven't got the time for it. Whereas the physical movements and the physical behaviors can be really, really helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's simple. So what I'll hopefully with you guys will do in the next 12 months is you use that 4-stage process to develop different types of ways to develop good mindsets and how to manage your emotions. So I'll finish on this one because I know we're running into the hour. So making performance habits stick. And these are just a few really simple strategies to help you develop good habits. First one is consistency. So for your brain to register and recognize that they need to do a behavior again, you need to make sure you practice it in the same environment and at a similar time. So if you think of the classic example of having a shower at a certain time, having a coffee at a certain time, going to training at a certain time, that consistency in terms of doing it in the same environment and at a similar time is really important for a habit to stick, okay? The next one links onto it very nicely, which is repetition. On average, it takes a habit to takes a behavior to become a habit between 2 to 3 months, roughly. And for that to occur, you've got to do it probably, I would say, daily, or at least 3 or 4 times a week, roughly, for it to go from the short-term memory to long-term memory, okay? That's why the bang onto it is boring, but consistency and repetition is crucially important because it allows you to move things into the subconscious. So these habits, you won't have to really think about anymore how to do them. You will just automatically do it when there's a cue in the environment that triggers that mindset. I've got a thing here called temptation building. So for you to do a new behavior, which in itself can be quite mentally demanding, could be overwhelming because it's a new behavior you're not sure what you're doing, it's better to do a new habit after you've done something that you enjoy doing. So if you go to the gym and you love going to the gym, or you bought yourself something, or you've had a good experience, that's the time to do something new, because your brain's more open to processing information, it's more open-minded. Whereas you try to do a habit when you're in a bad mood, you will know from experience it's less likely to stick. So try to do the new, make it easy for yourself and do a new behavior after a positive experience, whether it's small and simple or even a big experience. It makes things stick, it makes things easier. And then also as well, you associate that new behavior with a positive feeling. Whereas if you do the new behavior when you've had a bad experience, you pair up a bad emotion with a bad behavior, which means you're less inclined or don't want to do it again. The final one is called habit stacking. So what I mean by that is you will put, like, you will already be aware, you'll probably have some habits that you've already established. So if you're trying to get into a good routine, but add things to that routine, add the habit at a similar time to add the new behavior to an already established habit. So do it at a similar time, because it's easier to pair up as opposed to doing it at a random time that you've never done before. So these
can I give an example of this?
Yeah, go for it.
So I don't know if you've read the book, Casper, Atomic Habits, James Clear.
Yeah.
So I read this book and it's talking about habit stacking. I'm really bad for making coffee at home, like make 4 or 5 cups a day. So I stacked press ups into my daily routine when I made my coffee. So when the kettle was boiling, I was doing press ups. Yeah. So the habits were connected, combined.
Yeah, exactly. A lot easier to do then, because my equivalent of that was when I was having my waiting for my porridge to go through the microwave, I would do my arm and neck stretches for 2 minutes. It'd make a massive difference. So again, Bobby's example is a great example that it's a lot easier if you do it alongside an already established one. And these little differences of how you do something can make a big difference. Okay. So finishing off this little thing is, I know I've kept you engaged, I think Kosh is still here with me, is these are just a final few kind of strategies to get into the habit of doing effective mental skills training. Ensure you do it 3 to 5 times a week. And when I say times a week, that could be anything from regularly listening to music to switch off, whether it's you're planning in your organization, whether it's engaging in talking about, reflecting on what you've done well, saying positive things to yourself, whatever it may be, 3 to 5 times a week, which sounds like a lot, but actual fact, when you break it down into those little experiences, it's really easy. At least 5 to 10 minutes per session. So if it is listen to music 10 minutes 5 times a week, that in itself is going to make a big difference. Do it during training sessions. So I can't stress this enough. Don't try a new mental skill like imagery, self-taught, breathing in a competition setting or something that's pressurized, because 9 times out of 10, it might go wrong. And then you won't want to do it again. Try it during training, which is why that's why training's there. You can make mistakes, but you can learn from it and you can improve it. Also as well, during a training environment, it's safe to make mistakes. You're not worried so much about the consequences. I also put here, do it at home. Like you said, don't just do it in training. If you make it religious, like just before you go to bed, like that's why people talk about self-care routines before they go to sleep. That's a great example of regularly prepping the mind to think a certain way and feel a certain way. Reflect and review, and then motivation. Think about the positive consequences. Think about what are you going to gain from this. 9 times out of 10, people forget about what they're going to gain from something. If you're not aware about what you're going to gain, why would you keep doing it? So regularly remind yourself about what you're going to gain from the scenario, and that's crucially important, especially when you're learning something. It doesn't always go to plan, doesn't always go well. So think about, right, I've got to keep at it because I will eventually be able to be more mentally tough and compose myself better. I could get past that one. And that's it, girls. Can I just say thank you so much? Obviously, I hope we get to meet you in person eventually. But if you do want to have a bit more feedback with me or want to engage with me a bit more and learn a bit more about the psychology side, there's loads of ways you can contact me, whether that's through Bobby. You've got my number there, you've got my email, and I can meet you in a variety of ways. Whereas if I'm at a camp, I can have an informal chat with you, sitting down, whatever it may be. Expose yourself as much as possible to me and the idea of psychology, because like you said, it can make a massive difference to not just your performance, but also your well-being. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys, for top man. Appreciate that.
No worries, girls. Enjoy yourself. See you later.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.